Hello, dear friends, and welcome to this global whispered journey through holy places and sacred sites. Our journeys take us to North America, where traces of early humans in California have been dated as early as 43,000 BCE, but more commonly to 27,000 BCE. It's suggested that humankind entered America from the far north across the Bering Strait. The Americans have sometimes been linked to the Ainu, the original inhabitants of Japan. So if these early humans were related to the ancient peoples of Asia, then we may assume that their religion was shamanistic, based on the worship of spirits, and that the creator of the world was a great spirit, while their priests acted as contacts with them. And I think that's quite synonymous with a lot of holy iconography from North America. These petroglyphs, for example, a bear claw necklace, where the bear was held sacred, a transformation mask, where the Guaquito wear this mask in ceremonies. We've got here the Peterborough petroglyphs, carved by the Algonquin people, a great serpent mound. Here's a shell gorget made by Ohio woodlanders. Here we have the Kilauea volcano, the world's largest active volcano, the home of the goddess Pele, and their devotees still leave her offerings of hibiscus flowers and tropical fruit. It's believed that she lives inside the caldera, about 500 feet deep. So let's have a look in more detail, shall we? First of all, at the Serpent Mound, the sacred effigy of the ancient Americas. So during the 19th century, Americans were mystified by the immense number of man-made mounds scattered from the southeast to the midwest of the United States. It was suggested they'd once been inhabited by a foreign race and had possibly arrived from Mexico, Scandinavia, or even Atlantis. Few people were willing to accept that these mysterious mounds may have actually been built by the Native American peoples. It wasn't until 1894 that Cyrus Thomas put the myths and speculation to rest by establishing their indigenous origins. It's thought of as one of the most important American artworks. So as you can see it from the image here, the serpent isn't visible from ground level. You can only really climb a tower to see its true shape, so you can only really speculate what the inspiration for the giant effigy is. These are Hopewells, the early Adena culture. Almost certainly developed into the Hopewell people, merchants who travelled from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi and were sophisticated artists and craftsmen. This is likely a figurine of the Hopewell with the top knot that is distinctly Hopewellian. Could this have been an effigy for the gods? It's about 1.5 meters high and about 366 meters long, and in the shape of a snake with an egg-shaped form or frog in its mouth. So many have speculated that it was intended as an offering to the gods. Stunning. Imagine just discovering that etched into the countryside. It was almost going to be sold as a land for growing corn. That's interesting. Well done to F.W. Putnam at the Peabody Museum, who saved it from that fate. Here we have the Cahokia Mound, the ceremonial city of the Mississippians, where the Cahokia Mound State Park covers the area of the largest pre-Columbian community in North America, containing over 100 pyramid and burial mounds, and was a ceremonial centre for over 50 communities. Beautiful countryside here. This aerial view of the Monk's Mound shows the vast amount of labour involved in creating the structure. The local peoples might have declined because of a lack of, or the resulting overexploitation of natural resources, as well as agricultural degradation and overpopulation. But a lovely silhouette here. It's likely that the ruler of Cahokia, the Great Sun, lived on top of the monk's mound, and he was said to represent the sun on earth and was revered by the local peoples. Only the ruler and his priests were allowed to enter the temple on the summit. This is a stone pipe typical of artifacts from eastern North America. They're often carved into the shape of animals or birds, and this one's a raven. It belongs to a type called platform pipes, which had a flat base on which the carved figures rested. The tobacco was pushed into a chimney on the top, and the smoke drawn through a hole bored in the base. Chaco Canyon, home of the Ancient Ones. It's in New Mexico, and the home of an indigenous people called the Anasazi, who inhabited the area from a few centuries BCE until the 12th century CE. These great houses resemble modern apartment blocks and were built between 900 to 1115 BCE. Abundant pottery and baskets woven so tight that they could hold water suggested that they were highly advanced, although some stone axes revealed that they were actually a Stone Age culture. So these are kivas, the circular underground chambers where male members of the Anasazi people perform their sacred rituals. These stones of the kivas often have a high level of radioactivity, especially for the granite of which they are made. So some writers have speculated that Anasazi shamans were sensitive to such forms of energy. They were getting radiation poison, perhaps. Here's the meteor crater, sign of the flaming serpent god. So of course we've often seen images of this in popular media and culture, this huge crater near present-day Flagstaff in Arizona, which blasted out 4 million tons of earth. So it's surrounded by a ridge of uplifted sediment. No meteorite iron has been found at the bottom of the pit, so many scientists have suspected that it could have been formed by an immense explosion of volcanic steam. Yet the fact that the surrounding plain was covered with chunks of iron, with a centre of bright steel, should have convinced them otherwise. The meteor obviously exploded on impact like a fast bomb. The Navajo people regard it as a sacred site because, according to their legend, the crater was made by a flaming serpent god who passed overhead and hurled a thunderbolt as a sign it had been there. And the sunset crater, wonderful image there, isn't it, catching the sunlight. In northern Arizona, an extinct volcano in the San Francisco range is regarded by the Hopi people as a sacred mountain. A Hopi legend tells of how in the remote past the people became degenerate, so that the gods were prepared to destroy them by fire, and the only volcano in the region that has erupted recently enough to fit that legend is Sunset Crater. Strangely though, the eruption made the land more fertile, for the coating of ash trapped the water in the soil. Here we have Wupatki, the tall house of the Hopi, who are the indigenous peoples of Arizona. Their migration eventually brought them to the San Francisco peaks north of Flagstaff, where the Anasazi once lived. They built a tall house, which is now a ruin, but according to legend, when they first moved into the area, strange beings often wandered around the village, and a warrior carrying prayer sticks went to investigate the top of the mountain, where he heard a voice calling him from a kiva, an underground ritual chamber, and he found a man-like being who introduced himself as a spirit. Thus the Hopi established contact with the spirits of the mountains, the Kachinas, represented as grotesque figures with large noses. So the ruins are a Wupatki National Monument is a collection of over 800 pueblos, and the name of the ruin, known as the Wakoki, it translates as the big house. Here's another angle of it. Kilauea, beside the Pele's sacred lake that we talked about on the main page. An active volcano in 55, an eruption and earthquakes caused lava to pour from fissures for 88 days, destroyed a village, and 16 square kilometres of fertile farmland. So although it erupts frequently, the result is usually simply a slowly advancing and non-threatening sea of lava. But as recently as 1790, the volcano exploded violently, killing with hot steam a Hawaiian army marching near the caldera. It's the site of Alamarumau, a cooled lake of lava said to be the home of Pele, the goddess who is credited with creating Hawaii. Although Hawaiian religion collapsed at the beginning of the 19th century, devotees of Pele still leave her offerings of hibiscus flowers and tropical fruit, and many Hawaiians claim her as an ancestor. I mean, the landscape of Hawaii and the Pacific Islands are fascinating to me. The unique geography of the area, separated by sea. The Peterborough ancient petroglyphs here, a slab of crystalline limestone near Peterborough in Ontario, contains over 900 images carved into what has been described as white marble. They're believed to have been carved by the Algonquian people between 900 and 1400 CE. And forgotten for centuries, it was found again in 1924 by historian Charles Kingham. Boat figures among the petroglyphs do not resemble the traditional craft of Native Americans, but one solar boat, a stylized shaman vessel with a long mast surmounted by a sun, is a typical petroglyph found in northern Russia and Scandinavia. Interesting. According to Romas and Joan Vastokas, the chief authorities on Peterborough, a fissure in the rock was interpreted as the entrance to the underworld, or the symbolic womb of the Earth Mother. Lake Superior, the spirit home of the Ojibwe. The environs of the lake are the home of the Ojibwe people, who believe that the rocks of the lake house spirits. Their rich oral tradition tells of the supernatural beings passed from generation to generation through tribal elders. This makes sense, doesn't it, when you've got a little community that is nourished and gives its life to the environment around a large body of something unique like a lake, a beautiful lake. It's very easy to see why these creation myths are established. We've got Sprout Lakes petroglyphs of the Nootka. The whale shaman of the Nootka people performed elaborate ceremonies that would propagate the spirits of their ancestors who had power over whales and would cause them to make dead whales tread ashore near their village. They're one of an example of numerous rock carvings that lie along the Pacific coast of North America, and almost certainly carved by ancestors of the Nootka people who live in what is now British Columbia. They were named by Captain Cook in 1778, and Nootka seems to have been his attempt to pronounce their name, Nukanut, meaning all along the mountains. Gitanmak's village, the site of the potlatch ceremony. Here we have Chief Gitam Koldor. So it stands outside the potlatch house in Gitanmak's village at Hazelton, British Columbia. And totem poles were erected as memorials, and the raising of the poles was accompanied by the potlatch ceremony. So potlatch is a unique word meaning gift. So it's a ceremony of giving gifts. Here's the art of the North American peoples, which often depicts animals from myths or crest animals. Animals to display a family crest that was a jealously guarded family prerogative. This feast dish in the shape of a canoe has stylized bears at either end and a crest in the center, and they're important symbols of rank and wealth. We now move down the continent into Central and South America, where of course we encounter the ancient and famous native religions of Central and South America, including city of the gods here. There's Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent here, the most revered of the Mesoamerican gods. Look at this complex. You can imagine it being a bustling city. In the past, this street was named by local people in the belief that the mounds were tombs, so it was called the Avenue of the Dead. The street points at the setting of the Pleiades, and there is little doubt that the whole city is aligned astronomically in alignment to the dog star Sirius, secret to the ancient Egyptians, has caused some to suggest a link between the pyramids of Egypt and Mexico. I suppose it is a possibility. You have the Pyramid of the Moon here, which stands at the end of the Avenue of the Dead in the shadow of the Quetzalcoatl. It's shorter than the Pyramid of the Sun, but it stands on higher ground so that the two structures are roughly level. Look at this mask here. Vivid, somewhat terrifying. A priest's sacrificial mask. So, at its peak in about 500 BCE, Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Americas. Priests were its most powerful caste, and the mask here, with eyes made of shell and pyrite, with sacrificial knives in the mouth, and nose cavity, was almost certainly worn by the priests during ritual sacrifice, which must have been absolutely terrifying. We have the Olmecs here, the heads which have been included again in the Ancient Mysteries series on this channel. A fascinating mystery there of these people and their origins. We have Chichen Itza, the sacred city of the Maya and the Toltecs, one of the greatest ruined cities in Central America. It was rebuilt by the Toltecs almost a century later after being abandoned by the Maya in 900 CE. And on the outskirts of the town lies a sinister-looking sacred well that was once used for human sacrifice. The Temple of Kukulkan is the Toltec name for Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god. At an hour before sunset at the two equinoxes, a shadow resembling a giant undulating serpent is thrown across the steps. Here we have the Temple of the Warriors. This is a reclining figure here. This is a person in repose. Was christened a Chacmul, meaning jaguar boar, by Auguste Lepompion, the explorer who first discovered one at Chichen Itza in 1875. They're now recognized as ritual figures, probably representing fallen warriors who act as a messenger to the gods. And the dish on the stomach is intended for the heart of a sacrificial victim. The Mesoamericans were obsessed by the bull game, not merely as a sport, but as a profound religious ritual. An unknown number of men played on either side in a court shaped like a capital letter I. At Chichen Itza it had sloping walls, and where it was played as a religious ritual, the losing team was often sacrificed. The bull was originally made of stone, later of latex. It was thrown through circular discs, like that on the far right, attached to the sides of the bull court. The players had to strike the bull with the thigh or upper arm, or possibly with a kind of U-shaped stone yoke worn around the waist. And the tablet on the right here shows the decapitated player hero, Anampo, with blood gushing from his neck in the form of 7 serpents. I mean, could you imagine? You're playing a ball game and the penalty for losing this game is to be sacrificed. That would certainly put the wind up your sails, wouldn't it? Is the sacred sea note Wells being sacred to the rain god shark? There are 2 in Chichen Itza. Only one was used for sacrifice. The second was used for water supply. Tiwanaku and Lake Titicaca. Here we have the ruined site of Tiwanaku in the Bolivian Andes, built around 300 CE, abandoned around 1000 CE. About 13 miles from Lake Titicaca, that was once at sea level. great courtyard that was designed as a kind of observatory. Contains two massive statues of the principal deity of Tiwanaku. One of them has been positioned at the top of the megalithic stairway. Here's the great idol. A huge, wonderful structure there with intricate carvings. This gateway here leads you into that courtyard. You can see the reverse of it here. The gateway, 3 meters high, carved from a single block, probably the entrance to a sanctuary. And it stands in the corner. The figure on the side holds 2 staves. It might represent the precursor of Viruka. So who built this place and when? It was clearly a ritual area. This place means place of the standing stones, after the dagger-like stones that form its stockade. So was the Acapana Pyramid, a huge mound south of the Kalasaya, originally covered with steps made of andesite blocks. The name Acapana means the place where men perish, so it could have been a site of human sacrifice. In the early 20th century, before the advent of archaeological training and sophisticated dating techniques, some people speculated that Tiwanaku had been a great city peopled by refugees from the Old World or from Plato's mythical land of Atlantis. Here's a Viruka. Many of the statues and artifacts of Tiwanaku seem to represent a principal deity, which could have been a representation of an early ancestor of the 15th century Incan god, the mysterious saviour and civilizer Viruka. In Incan myth, the god is said to have risen from Lake Titicaca to create the sun, the moon, and the stars. He is sometimes portrayed with fish scales, a reference to his watery origins. The most famous representation is the great idol of Tiwanaku, here, excavated in 1932. Again, I'm just at awe of this being unearthed and discovered. Could you imagine? You maybe see the top of it emerging out of the soil, and then you slowly uncover more and more and more, and this huge entity emerges from the earth. Here's Lake Titicaca, what a wonderful expanse of land. The snow-capped Andes in the background there. An island in the centre of the lake is called by the indigenous people the Island of the Sun, and they declare that the sun god sent his son and daughter to the island with the mission of civilizing human beings who lived like animals. They taught men the skills of agriculture and women how to weave clothes. So they were gender coding even in the days of the gods. Needs no introduction here. Machu Picchu, of course, the lost city of the Inca. The fortress of Machu Picchu high in the Andes is one of the most spectacular sights in the world. I'd love to see it one day. It's just the setting of it that just looks so striking and amazing to me, these mountains. The Incan goldsmiths valued these objects, such as these which led greedy conquistadors to the Americas. They used golden objects for ritual purposes. But the discovery was here in 1911. Hiram Bingham, a professor at Yale University, set out in search of the fabled Vilcabamba, the last refuge of the Inca. The Spaniards captured Cusco in 1532, murdering the Incan emperor Atahualpa. His brother Manco Capac withdrew to Vilcabamba, where he remained undiscovered by the Spanish. A local led Bingham to Machu Picchu, which was overgrown with forest, and once it was cleared, he found rows of agricultural terraces and many fine examples of Incan architecture. I mean, again, peeling that back to reveal the city in the mountains. That's stunning. The inner Huatana, the hitching post of the sun, is an odd chunk of granite with geometrical carvings surmounted by a vertical prong, probably a form of astronomical marker used in important festivals, but it's also been suggested it was some form of sundial used in the form of sun worship. We have over here Cusco, the navel of the Incan world, and capital and religious centre of the Incan Empire. Here we have Sacsayhuaman, the sacred city, laid out to resemble the form of a puma. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman lies north of the city and represented the head, an example of the Inca's fine stone masonry. name suggests, the sacred valley surrounding Cuzco was littered with areas considered sacred to the Inca. Thousands of huacas could be found in its bills, mountains, rocks and streams. Another big mystery included in the 70 Mysteries of the Ancient World series, which was earlier last year, actually. Nazca lines the mysteries of the Andes here, where we have strange lines in the Peruvian desert. They were recently rediscovered when viewed from the air. Hundreds of huge drawings in the sand and straight lines radiate to the horizon that can be seen covering 193 square miles. The Nazca plain is windy, but the stones absorb enough sunlight to cause rising air to protect these lines. They could have been carbon dated to 350 CE, but could be even older. Dr. Phyllis Pedluca suggested that the giant spider here was based on the constellation Orion, and that the lines around it are designed to track its stars. There's little doubt that the lines had a ritual function that could have been astronomical. And Nazcans were skilled potters, and some of their pottery found by researcher Maria Reicha has been dated to the 1st century BCE. Many of the animals featured in the Nazca lines appear in the same style on this pottery. And then we move into the Pacific and Australasia. So we're jumping a little bit further over to the other side of the world here. So I think that's a good place to put a pin in this journey so far. And we can reflect on these holy places and sacred sites before moving on to the wonderfully mysterious Pacific and Australasia. So I look forward to having you join me next time. But until then, goodbye.